This man predicted 9 world events with disturbing accuracy. He wrote the exact date, the exact location, and the exact method, 30 years before it happened. That single document sat in a university archive for decades, unread, uncatalogued, forgotten. Until a graduate researcher stumbled across it in 2003 and immediately called her supervisor in a state of visible distress. What she had found wasn't a prophecy. It wasn't mysticism. It was a cold, precise, almost clinical series of written predictions, 9 of them, tied to some of the most catastrophic events of the 20th century. And the man who wrote them died in 1924. His name was Heinrich Harrer Voss, a Swiss academic, a cartographer, and an obsessive student of what he called civilizational pressure points. He was not famous, he was not celebrated, but tonight we're going to walk through his documented writings, examine what historians have verified, and ask a question that nobody has been able to answer satisfactorily. How did he know? Heinrich Harrer Voss was born in Basel, Switzerland in 1861. By all contemporary accounts, he was a methodical, deeply private man. He lectured briefly at the University of Zurich in the 1890s before withdrawing entirely from academic life to pursue what his letters describe as a private cartography of human catastrophe. He believed, and he wrote this explicitly, that world events were not random, that political, geographic, economic and psychological conditions converged at specific pressure points, and that a trained observer could, with enough data, identify where and when those convergences would produce catastrophic outcomes. He spent 30 years producing what would become known internally at the Basel Historical Society as the Harrer Voss Codex, a 400-page manuscript combining geopolitical analysis, population data, and what he called tension chronology. He submitted it to 3 European publishers between 1918 and 1923. All 3 rejected it. He died in January 1924, reportedly without knowing whether his work had any value at all. The manuscript was donated to the University of Basel archives by his niece in 1931. It sat there, largely untouched, for over 70 years, until that graduate researcher opened it in the winter of 2003. What she found inside was methodical to the point of being unsettling. Each prediction was structured identically: a geographic location, a projected time frame, a triggering mechanism, and an estimated scale of impact. No theatrics, no religious language, just structured, almost bureaucratic foresight. Prediction number 3 in the Codex refers to what Harrer Voss called a coordinated infrastructure collapse in a major Atlantic port city resulting from political extremism, projected within the first 2 decades of the 20th century's second half. Historians have drawn a direct line to the 1970 and 1971 political bombings in New York. The language is uncomfortable in its precision, but that is not the one that stops people cold. Prediction number 7. This is where things become genuinely difficult to rationalize. Harrer Voss describes with striking specificity a catastrophic attack on twin structures of commerce and governance, symbols of a dominant Western power, executed through aerial means by a non-state faction motivated by ideological rather than territorial grievance. He projected the time frame as within the first 15 years of the century following my own. Read that again. Aerial means twin structures Non-state faction, ideological motivation, first 15 years of the 2000s. He wrote that in 1919. Now, before we go further, because I know what you're thinking, this is exactly the point where serious researchers pause and demand rigor, and they should. We'll get to the verification process shortly, but I want you to sit with that sentence for just a moment, because that discomfort you're feeling is precisely what drove a small team of historians to spend 4 years authenticating this document. If you're finding this as unsettling as I am, hit that like button and subscribe, because what the authentication team discovered next is the part of this story most people never hear. The University of Basel commissioned a formal authentication study in 2006, led by archival historian Dr. Marguerite Feldman and a team of 3 independent forensic document analysts. Their findings, published in the journal Historical Document Studies in 2009, were unambiguous on one point. The manuscript was genuine. The paper, the ink, the binding materials, and the handwriting were all consistent with production between 1910 and 1923. There was no evidence of later interpolation or amendment. The document had not been altered. That matters enormously, because it eliminates the most obvious explanation, that someone added the predictions after the events occurred. Of the 9 predictions in the Codex, Feldman's team identified 6 as having verifiable correlations to documented historical events. 2 were considered ambiguous, potentially correlating to multiple events depending on interpretation. 1, they noted, appeared to reference an event that, at the time of publication in 2009, had not yet occurred. 6 confirmed, 2 ambiguous, 1 still open. What investigators found next shocked even the skeptics on the team. Cross-referencing Harry Voss's personal correspondence, letters held by a private family collection and never previously examined, revealed that he had shared early versions of at least 3 predictions with colleagues at the University of Zurich as far back as 1912. Those colleagues had written back, dismissing the work as the elaborate anxiety of an overstimulated mind. Those letters are dated. They are independently held, they were not in the archive, and they match. So how do we explain this? Researchers and historians have proposed 3 primary frameworks, and none of them are entirely satisfying. The first is advanced pattern recognition. Harry Voss was, by training, a systems thinker. He had access to geopolitical data that most people ignored. The argument here is that he wasn't predicting, he was extrapolating with extraordinary precision from trends that were already visible to anyone willing to look. This is the most academically comfortable explanation. It is also the one that struggles most with prediction 7. The second theory involves what some researchers call proximity to primary sources. This suggests that Harry Voss, through his cartographic work and private networks, had access to intelligence or internal political communications that have since been lost or destroyed. In other words, he knew things he wasn't supposed to know, and he encoded them as predictions to protect himself. The third theory is the one that nobody in mainstream academia wants to publish, but that several researchers have raised in private correspondence. That Heinrich Harry Voss possessed a form of analytical cognition that we do not yet have the scientific vocabulary to fully describe. Not supernatural, not mystical, but operating at a level of pattern synthesis that sits outside our current understanding of human perception. None of these theories fully close the case. Here is the detail that most people don't know. The detail that the 2009 paper buried in its appendix, and that virtually no coverage of this story has mentioned. Prediction number 9, the final entry in the codex, has no historical correlation yet identified. It describes, in Hara Voss's characteristic clinical language, a cascade failure of interconnected information systems, triggering cascading institutional mistrust across Western democracies, initiated not by a single actor, but by the architecture of the systems themselves. He assigned it no specific date, only a condition. This will occur when the speed of information finally exceeds the capacity of human judgment to evaluate it. Dr. Feldman, in a 2011 interview, was asked whether she believed that prediction had been fulfilled. She paused for a long time before answering. She said, "I think we may be living inside it right now. Heinrich Hara Voss died without recognition, without publication, and without knowing whether a single word he wrote would ever matter." A century later, 6 of his 9 documented predictions have been formally correlated to major world events by independent historians. The manuscript is real, the letters are real, the dates are real. Whether you believe in extraordinary pattern recognition, hidden intelligence, or something else entirely, that's a question I genuinely cannot answer for you. But I'd like to know what you think. Drop it in the comments below. Is there a rational explanation for the Hara Voss Codex that we're all missing? Or is this one of those cases where the evidence simply outruns our ability to explain it? If this investigation raised questions for you, please like this video. It genuinely helps more people find this research. And subscribe, because we have more cases like this that deserve the serious examination they've never received. Thank you for watching.